the best way for me to explain how UCSs work is to go through a quick example together. So in this video, I'm going to be creating a UCS that adds a bullnose to an adjustable shelf. And as we're creating it, I'm going to be explaining how I format things, why I do things, and how it needs to be structured. So basically, when you click on an adjustable shelf after we're done, you'll be able to see the bullnose get added. It's going to miter the adjustable shelf, and you'll also have an attribute to change the size of it. So through this example, you're going to learn a lot about how to structure UCSs, and hopefully it really opens your mind to the possibilities that you can go from here and do in Cabinet Vision. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm at the main splash screen of version 2022, and you can use any version of Cabinet Vision. All the logic and ideas will still apply. Now I can get to the UCSs from the Utilities tab of the main screen. However, I like to always work within a job because I like to go back and forth quite a bit and kind of verify my work. So we're going to start a job. I'm not going to worry about the details, and we'll just do a simple wall and drop a base cabinet on the wall. Okay, so I'm going to put an adjustable shelf in because that's what we're working on today. There we go. Okay, so as you notice, we don't have any attribute. None of this logic is here that we're going to be building today. So I'm going to go to Utilities at the top and go to User Created Standards. Now I don't have any UCSs in my screen right now, so I can just go up here to the top left and hit Create New. And it's going to bring up a wizard with 9 steps. And for the most part, I don't use this wizard too much, but we will get a couple things out of it. First thing we need to do is give it a name. And some people, very much standardize, what type of part they're working on. I just like to give it a very friendly name. What am I doing? Well, I'm adding a bullnose to adjustable shelf. So whatever naming scheme works for you. Okay, so after we give it a name, there's just a couple parts of the wizard I like to use. So what's the type? Well, I'm going to be adding a bullnose to the adjustable shelf, so I'll leave it on add a part. Now, what kind of part do I want to add? And this is all dependent on what you have in your material schedules. Say your unfinished left end is made out of 1/2-inch plywood. Well, I want this bullnose to be solid wood, so I can't use an unfinished left end. So for that reason, I'm going to use this board thing because I have 3/4 solid material assigned to the board part. So it all depends on what material you want it to be on what part you add it as. So I'm going to click Next. What part do I want to link to? Well, I'm going to be working on the adjustable shelf today. And now the rest of these, they can be useful, like if you wanted to only work on base cabinets and, if you want a certain end type, but myself, I find it easier to write in code than to use their wizard, especially on the dimensions and things. I just find it a little confusing to operate within the wizard. So we're going to click Finish, and we're going to open the code. Okay, so this is what our wizard generated. We have just a few parts here. So the very top row, this is just a description. You're more than welcome to change this to give it a little more clarity. This will show up also right here. So, you give it a nice name, and then you can also add more explanation here in the description. And, when you start writing UCSs and you get 50 to 100 and even more UCSs, it can be really easy to get confused on what they were originally created for. So always a good idea to document exactly what you're doing. So the next part that we want to look at is this line number 3, which if you don't see the numbers on yours, just toggle this little switch up here. Very helpful to have the line numbers. The for each part. Every UCS has to have this line, and it can only exist one time. And this tells you what part we're going to be working on. So I'm going to add some comments here so we can see the different sections. So this doesn't affect the UCS, it's just for us visually to see. So that is the for each. Now, you might say, well, how do I know that adjustable shelf is AS? And that's a great question. So why don't we just get out of the UCS and go look at that? Our most valuable resource when we're writing UCSs is the object tree, because, Now at this point where I'm at, I know that adjustable shelf is AS, but when you're just starting out, how are you going to know that? So if you go to the object tree, there's 3 sections: case, interior, face. The adjustable shelf is going to be on the interior, and you can see the little abbreviation beside every part. So adjustable shelf is AS. And if you want to look at the case, finished in is LF, unfinished back is UB. So you have all of your information right here in the object tree. So let's go back to our UCS. So we know what the for each does. That's just telling us what part we're going to be working on. Now, let's ignore this thing we generated here. This is what adds the part. And we'll come back to this. But for now, I want to focus on the next section. So the first one is the for each part. And next we want to look at adding attributes. Because if you remember from the beginning of the video, the attribute on the sidebar is what triggered our UCS. So that's what we're going to look at next. So again, this green line here, this is just comments, just so you can see it visually. So the very first thing I want to do is add that little attribute, that just a true or false way to turn on or turn off my UCS. So I'm going to say if, and now I can give it a name. Now I'm just going to call it Myron Bullnose Add. This can be named however you want. Sometimes I use my initials, sometimes I use my name. Whatever you do, I like to always start it with the same thing. That way when you're looking in the object tree, you'll easily be able to find your custom added things. And you'll learn that as you go. So the very first line when you're adding an attribute is check if it already exists, because we don't want it to continually be trying to re-add itself. So I'm going to say if my parameter equals null, then we're going to go to the next line. Now, I want to pause right here. Don't get overwhelmed, because the point of this video is I'm going to just kind of expose you to how a UCS works. So don't just be like, oh, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a coder, I can't do this. It's perfectly logical, and the point of this video is for me to explain it to you. Okay, so there's our first one. We're just checking if this parameter exists. And so if it is null, we're going to add a Boolean, which is a true or false. And what is going to be the default value? Well, I want it to be false by default, and then someone can come and turn it on if they want to. Next, we have to tell it what type of attribute is it, because there's three types. There's the sidebar attribute that is most common. I almost always use, oops, that's supposed to be style. I almost always use style of 1, because that's the sidebar attribute. You can also do a note or a hidden attribute as well. But like I said, style number 1 is the sidebar attribute, and that's what you almost always use. And then the final one is the description. This is the name that's going to show up, and I just need to enclose it in single quotes. So I'll just say bullnose.add. And I like to always format it in a question, so the user definitely knows what to do here. So do you want to add it? True. And then to finish out this attribute, I need to close off my if statement. So let's go back and summarize. These 4 lines here, 5 lines I should say, this adds that sidebar attribute, and we're going to go back and look at it here in a second. But it opens with saying, if this parameter is null, then go ahead and do all this, basically add the attribute. And then every time you open with an if-then statement, you have to have an end if to close it out. So let's close out of this and go look at what we added. Now when I click on an adjustable shelf, I have bullnose add equals false, and I can easily switch it, but right now it doesn't do anything. It's just there. So let's go back to our UCS, and let's make so this board adds whenever we turn it to true. So I'm just going to add another section here, and we're going to just call this actions, because this is where we take logic that we set above and we actually do something on the adjustable shelf. So now we can use this auto-generated part. Every every time you add a part, you have to have a certain set of parameters. You have to have the sizing ones. So dx is width, dy is length, dz is thickness. You have to have these when you're adding a new part. Then we have the positioning. And that's the x, y, and z. So this depends on how your part is oriented, but typically x is left to right, y is up and down, and z is in and out. And these are going to help us position our part, based off of our adjustable shelf. And then finally we have the angle. And we'll just start out with these at 0. But this is if we need to turn our part or flip our part, to make sure the grain's the right way or just to get it looking right. And then the top one is board.visible and it's set to false. Well, we want that to be true. So what I like to do is I like to just kind of put numbers in here and then just go see where it lands. So I'm going to say our board is going to be 1.5 inches by 20 inches long. Now, when I'm writing a UCS, I'll never leave hard-coded numbers like this. I want to assign it to, the adjustable shelf's length and all that good stuff. But when I'm first getting started and I just want to see where it's positioned, I'll just put those numbers in there. And remember, dx is the width, dy is the length, and dz is the thickness. Now, I don't even have to change the thickness because right now it's looking at the material, which remember we want it to be 3/4 solid material, so it's just going to look up that 3/4. So I actually don't even need to worry about that. Okay, so let's go look what happens when I where this board lands. Okay, so here we can see he's just kind of at the back of my shelf and kind of in line. Now, I want to show you 2 ways you can go about this. So first, let's go to our positioning parameters, and let's just move this out 30 inches. So now you see this is up and down, so I moved it the wrong way. Technically I wanted to push it out here. But I wanted to show you, this is why I start a UCS in a job, so I can just go back and forth a lot. And, I really don't have to know how everything works because I can just kind of try things. Now, for this video, I'm going to actually use a special parameter called face WP. And instead of referencing it at the back, I can reference it right off of the edge, so I don't even have to mess with the positioning. And one helpful resource I want to point you toward right now is if you go to the Help menu and go to Help Topics, go to Tips and Tricks and UCS, and there's 3 here at the top that I reference a lot. So the first one is Breakdown of UCSs. This covers the main 9 parameters. So remember what we saw when we added a part. We got dx, dy, dz, the sizing parameters. Then we got x, y, and z, the positioning parameters. And then we got the angle parameters. So this can be helpful when you're getting started. The next one, the functions and operators, this shows you all the ways you can manipulate data or check, equals to or is greater than or is null. And this can be helpful to know what you're able to do. And then system parameters, this is probably what I reference most often. And this is where that face WP parameter is. So, for example, if I just do a search for face WP, here is the parameter that I'm going to be using. So it specifies the face work plane to place the object, and then you can just pick which side. And so this is going to help us. Now, like I said, you can do it either way, and you're going to find when you start writing UCSs, everybody's going to write very different from each other. And a lot of times there's really no right and wrong way. Sometimes there's more efficient ways. Sometimes it's just programmer preference. So I'm going to go back to my UCS. And I'm going to set my positioning back to 0. And I'm going to add this face WP parameter. So I'm going to say board.face WP. And then I'm going to just try a number here. Again, I could try to figure out, how the adjustable shelf is positioned and try to figure out the number. But what I do a lot of times is I'll just try a number and see where it lands and then adjust from there. So let's close out of this, and okay, that's exactly what we wanted. So now you can see, instead of trying to adjust all the positioning parameters by starting it from the right place, now I have way less work to do. Okay, so this is cool. All right, so now you see we're 1.5 inches by 20 inches, which obviously we don't want it to be 20 inches because the shelf is going to change. So what I need to do is I need to tie this board to the adjustable shelf's length. So how do I know what the adjustable shelf's length is? Well, the object tree is your best friend. So let's go to the interior, look at the adjustable shelf, and remember we have our sizing parameters. And right at first you'll probably get confused between dx, dy, and dz. But go to the object tree, obviously this cabinet is wider, so dy is the length of the part. So all I need to do is reference the adjustable shelf's dy and make that my board length. So let's go do that. Okay, so under dy, instead of 20, I want it to be my parent's dy. So there's a little shortcut here where I just do colon and then dy, which is essentially saying, adjustable shelf.dy. But it looks specifically at the shelf that's related, or the parent. Okay, so now let's look what that did. Cool. So now as our cabinet changes, it's going to always match the adjustable shelf. So I don't need to have to worry about the logic of, if the cabinet size changes, because the adjustable shelf already knows how to size itself. So I just have to tie it to that. Okay, now I want to add another attribute on the sidebar that enables us to change this front board size. So let's go back to our UCS, and for the attributes, what I like to do is after I have one, I'll just copy it, and then we can just tweak a couple values. So this time, I can't name it the same. I can't have two attributes named the same, so I'll just say, well, I want to edit the height, so I'll just say dy. Again, this name is totally up to you. Okay, now we need to tweak a few things. We don't want it to be true or false. We want to be able to type in a measurement. So I'm going to go to measure, and I'm going to default it to 1.5 inches. And you may wonder how you're supposed to know what to put in here. There's only a few types to pick from, and you can find that all in the help files on that, either that first document or the second one. But you have like integer, text, Boolean, measure, angle. I almost always use Boolean, measure, and integer. But you can always go to the help files and see what's available there. So we're going to leave the style on 1, which makes it a sidebar attribute. We're going to change our description to say, I'm just going to call it height. And now let's go look at that. So now when I click my adjustable shelf, now I have 2. So this is cool. But what's weird is, this is false, and it still gives me the option to show this. So no matter whether this is enabled or not, I always have this, and I don't like that. Especially when you have a lot of UCSs adding sidebar attributes, you need to keep it as clean as possible. So let's take this a step farther and make this a little more logical. So let's just bring this down, and I want to add a condition. So if this parameter up here equals true, then we're going to do all of this stuff that we did down here. We're going to add our height parameter, and we're going to actually add the part. And now, to help you see what you're doing, I like to always indent. Notice how I did with the parameters. Anything inside the if statement, I indent. That way it's really easy for me to see where things are at. So same thing applies. If this equals true, then do all of this. Okay, so now if I would close out of this, it's going to give me an error. And it says unexpected end of UCS. And so it's really good about telling you what you're missing. And what that means is we created an if statement that doesn't have an end to it. So we always have to close out our if statements. And again, the indenting will help you, kind of see where your ifs start and where they close. So yeah, I highly recommend doing that, or using spaces or some type of indenting logic here. Okay, so now this parameter will only add if it's true, and this part will only add if it's true. So let's go look at that. Okay, so now when we click on adjustable shelf, notice our part is not there. If I turn it to true, it is. If I turn it to false, it goes away. But notice my height never went away. I would like that to disappear whenever it's false. And the reason for that is it was already created, and I don't have anything telling it to go away if it's false. So if I would bring out a new cabinet, yes, it wouldn't be there the first time, but once I had enabled it to true and then turned it back off, it would always be there. So let's add one more line to clean that up. So if this equals true, then do all of this. Else, if it's not true, and it's up to you on how much you comment. I like to be somewhat descriptive and kind of describe what I'm doing, especially, if a few months go by, you kind of forget why you did things, but good idea to do comments. So else, if it's not true, I'm going to delete this attribute. And now let's look what we did here. So now, whenever I turn it to true, it adds that height attribute, and whenever I turn it to false, it deletes it. So little things like this are going to make things so much cleaner in your cabinet vision, because when I first started learning UCSs, I was making stuff left and right, and I kind of made a mess of our system. And that's okay, because everybody needs to take their learning journey, but you do want to work efficiently, and you do want to work cleanly. So good idea to just do little practices like that to keep everybody on the same page and aware of what's happening. Okay, next let's do a couple things here. So right now I have my width of my new board hard-coded to 1.5 inches. And remember, I almost never like to do that. So we have this attribute up here that allows us to change the size. So I'm just going to replace that 1.5 inches with the attribute instead. So the width of my new board is going to be whatever that attribute is set to. So now if I go enable this, if I change that, I can easily do that. Sweet. Okay, now there's a couple things we need to do. I would like to miter this, and if I zoom in, you can see that it actually has banding. We don't want banding whenever they have a bull nose. And then, so we want to miter both parts. We'll have to move it in a little bit, and then we need to get rid of the banding. So let's miter the new board we added first. So there's 4 miter parameters. Well, there's actually more, but there's 4 for a normal part. There's miter left, miter right, miter top, and miter bottom. And again, you can easily find this by going to the help topics if you forget which one it is. And this is another situation where I don't put too much thought into it because how the part is oriented or how it's rotated makes this kind of confusing to think through. But I'll just take a stab at one, and then if it's not right, I'll move it. Okay, so that did what we wanted. That's perfect. Our board is mitered. Now let's move it in toward the shelf. Now, it always helps just to kind of, you don't even have to talk out loud, but just think to yourself what you want to do. And it just really helps you from a programming perspective. So, I want to move this board in the width, however thick it is, right? Because see, it's oriented here where the dot is. I just need to move it in 3/4 inches. But I don't want to type 3/4 because what if I change my material to 7/8 material? So I need to make it smart. So I'm going to go back to user created standards. And I don't know which position parameter is which yet. I'm just going to start with Y. And I'm going to move it minus DZ. So not the parent's DZ, not the adjustable shelf's DZ like we did with the length here, just regular DZ, which is referencing this new board's thickness. Okay, and I went the wrong way. You see that's left to right. So that's okay. Now, I would probably label this just so I know for next time. So I'll move this. Let's try X. That's not right. It's Z. Third time's the charm. And I'll label this one. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now that's in position. And you see, I'm kind of rendering weird because I haven't mitered my adjustable shelf yet, and it still has the banding. So let's go back to our UCS, and just clean that line up, and I'm gonna make a line here. Now, the banding for a four-sided part, I want all banding to be none whenever this is enabled. Now, again, if you want to see how this works, search for banding in that help document, and it's going to explain how the banding parameter works. But let's see if this works. So now, if this is enabled, and I did not do something right, so I'm going to go to my help topics, tips and tricks, UCS, system parameters, and I'm going to do a search for band. And there we go. Okay, it's just band, not banding. But here's what I was talking about. So like if I set it to none, if I set it to N, it equals none, I is interior, and you kind of see what's happening here. So I actually misspelled that, and spelling is very important. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm setting all four sides of the part to none. If I would do something like this, it would put interior banding on one side. Okay, so now the banding's gone, that's perfect. And let's put our miter on our adjustable shelf. So again, it's hard to know which side to pick. Like I can see that this is the bottom over here due to that origin point. So like miter left, miter top, miter right. But again, it's perfectly okay to just take a stab at it rather than trying to think it through. Okay, that is coming along nicely. Now we have our resizable thing. We can turn it on and off. The banding comes back. That is looking good. Now, you'll notice that when I click on this, it just says board, and even's in our report list. It's just going to say board, which is not good. So let's give that a better name. So board.name equals, I'll just say bull nose. Now when I click on it, it's going to say board-bullnose because board is the type of part it is, and then here's the friendly name, and then also down here you're going to see bullnose. Okay, so that is essentially, we have a nice working UCS that we can enable, modify, and you kind of, hopefully this kind of opens your imagination to all the ways that you can use sidebar attributes, you can use if conditions, you can modify part sizing, positioning, anything. There's really just an endless amount of things you do. And, I hope this video inspires you to, dig into the object tree and dig into the help topics and try to write your own. When I first started out, looking back, some of my first UCSs were very elementary, and, I would definitely not write them the same. But it's a process, and the UCS part of Cabinet Vision is where Cabinet Vision becomes a really great software. Cabinet Vision itself is really good, but the UCS is what really makes it customizable and what really makes it yours, and you can automate things. So I hope this video was helpful in just kind of seeing what's possible and how I structure things and kind of just what a UCS is made up of. So thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments what you guys think. Would you like to see more videos, more examples? Yeah, let me know. I'll be happy to hear what you guys have to say.